I was 60 years old when I finally set foot inside a NASCAR Speedway. For half a lifetime, I had dreamed of this moment. When I was a boy, the sound of engines on the radio was enough to make my blood quicken, to set my imagination aflame. I wanted to see it, feel it, taste it, the thunder of stock cars in battle, roaring across the track at impossible speeds. But life, as it always does, had other plans. Work, family, debts, sickness, recovery, decades swept by in a blur. The dream faded into the background, but it never vanished. It waited, like something half buried, until finally, in the year 2000, I decided I was done waiting. My children grown, my body still strong enough, my wife gone 3 years. Now I bought the ticket. I packed the car, and I drove, heart pounding, to Daytona. The closer I came, the more the world seemed to hum. Highways thickened with traffic, caravans of fans in trucks, and RVs, windows plastered with decals, flags whipping in the wind. Every vehicle seemed alive, throbbing with anticipation. I joined the flow, swallowed by something larger than myself, grinning like a boy again. When I reached the speedway, my breath caught. The stands rose up like a monument, immense and gleaming, thousands of seats stacked into the sky. The air vibrated with voices, laughter, arguments, chants. The smell hit me next: burnt rubber, gasoline, fried food, sweat. It was glorious. I found my seat among a sea of humanity. Around me were men with beer bellies and women in tank tops, children with faces painted, old veterans in faded caps, strangers all, yet bound together, a single chorus of excitement. I felt my heart swell. For once, I was part of it, no longer the man on the outside looking in, but one of the faithful, gathered for the great spectacle. And then the engines. Even before the cars rolled out, we heard them warming, snarling in the pits, a growl deep enough to rattle bone, low enough to shake the concrete beneath our shoes. The crowd roared back, rising as one, hands in the air, mouths wide. I shouted too, voice torn raw, as the cars lined up. The green flag dropped. The sound was indescribable. 40 engines igniting at once, a unified detonation. The air itself split. My chest vibrated, my teeth buzzed, my very skin seemed to peel away beneath the onslaught of noise. The cars blurred past, colors streaking, logos flashing. The stands thundered, feet pounding the concrete, a rhythm like war drums. I was elated. I was alive. Every sense overloaded, every nerve burning. The years fell away. I was not old, not tired, not worn. I was a boy again, wide-eyed, breathless, awestruck. But somewhere, in the roar, a strange unease stirred. It wasn't the noise, though deafening. It was beautiful. It wasn't the crowd, though massive. It was joyous. No, it was something beneath all that. A hum I couldn't quite place. An undercurrent woven through the thunder. A sound too steady, too precise. The engines screamed. But underneath, I thought I heard a voice. No, not a voice. Many voices. Layered, blending, as if the roar of the cars carried with it a chorus of words. Words I couldn't understand. Words not meant for language. I shook it off. Too much adrenaline. Too much heat. But the thought lingered, like smoke that won't clear. Around me, the crowd swayed. I hadn't noticed it before, but now I saw, when the cars passed, the stands moved, not just individuals, but whole sections, leaning as one, rising as one, shouting in uncanny unison. It was natural, maybe. People get swept up together, but still, the synchronicity was too sharp, too absolute, like thousands of bodies answering to a single conductor. When the cars tore down the straightaway again, the crowd's cry wasn't a cheer anymore. It was a chant. I couldn't make out the words. Maybe there were no words, just sound, guttural and harsh, erupting from 10,000 throats at once. My pulse quickened. The hair rose on my arms. I tried to laugh at myself. Nerves, imagination, nothing more. This was what I had dreamed of. This was joy. But as the cars blurred by again, the chant deepened. My seat vibrated, not from the engines but from the voices. The stands themselves seemed to rumble, to shift, as though breathing. I looked down at the concrete beneath my shoes and swore it swelled, just slightly, like a chest inhaling. The air grew hot, too hot. Sweat poured down my back. My throat felt dry, sandpapered, though I had just finished a bottle of water. The cars thundered past again, and this time I didn't see drivers, not faces behind glass, not hands gripping wheels, only black shapes, blurred silhouettes, bodies too long, too thin, bent forward as though stretching, reaching. Their helmets seemed empty, hollow, no eyes, no mouths, only darkness. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and they were men again. Just men, just racers. But the unease grew heavier. This was no simple race. Something else was happening. Something older, deeper, hidden beneath the spectacle. And I had walked willingly into its heart. The race thundered on, laps blurring together, time slipping like sand through trembling fingers. My eyes watered from the exhaust. My ears rang from the engine roar. But I could not look away. I was hooked, tethered to the track as if by invisible chains. The cars streamed past in formation, streaks of color burning against the gray of asphalt. I tried to focus on the numbers, the names he'd memorized from magazines, but each lap blurred them further. The cars weren't competing anymore. They moved to perfectly, to synchronized, weaving and diving in a pattern that felt rehearsed, ancient, inevitable. And the crowd, I had thought at first that they were cheering, but by the 10th lap, the sound had changed. No random shouts, no drunken whoops or laughter. Instead, a unified rhythm, guttural and deep, rolling from the stands like thunder. At first I told myself it was coincidence, that many people together, voices overlapping, will always form patterns. But this wasn't accident, this was design. Thousands of throats opened and closed in unison, expelling a chant that rose and fell with the car's motion. It wasn't words, or if it was, they were too old, too buried, for me to recognize. A sequence of syllables that rattled bone more than eardrum. The sound pressed into me, forcing my chest to vibrate, my teeth to grind. I looked around, desperate to see individuality, anything human. But all I saw were mouths, rows of them, open wide, shouting the same rhythm. Their eyes were blank, glassy, staring at the track without blinking. Their arms rose and fell in time, fists pounding their thighs, hands clapping in perfect synchronization. Not a crowd, a choir, a single body, with thousands of faces, thousands of mouths. I stood, my legs trembling, my heart hammering against my ribs. A man beside me glanced in my direction, but his gaze was wrong. Too smooth, too empty, his face stretched into a grin, wide and stiff, his teeth to uniform, his lips moving in exact unison with the chant. I turned away, nausea roiling in my gut. The heat bore down heavier, thick and damp, the air sticky against my skin. I swallowed, throat raw, but my mouth was too dry. The smell of gasoline thickened, sour now, metallic. I gagged, but the sound was swallowed instantly by the chant, by the engines, by the rhythm that consumed everything. Another lap. The cars roared past again, faster now, impossibly fast, a blur of motion. For a second, they weren't cars at all. They were streaks of light and shadow, elongated bodies with no wheels, no windows, no drivers, shapes that bent around the curve of the track like liquid, like tendons stretched across bone. I squeezed my eyes shut, shaking my head, forcing myself to breathe. When I opened them, the cars were cars again. But I wasn't convinced. The track itself had begun to pulse. The asphalt shimmered, waves rippling outward, as though it were not solid ground, but liquid, alive, breathing in rhythm with the stands. Every lap, every roar, deepened the pulse. The white lines blurred, spiraling, stretching, until they resembled something far older than paint sigils carved into stone, symbols meant not for direction, but for worship. The chant grew louder. My head ached, splitting pain behind my eyes. I pressed my palms against my temples, but it didn't stop. The sound was inside me now, vibrating through marrow and sinew. I wanted to scream, to push it out, but my throat locked tight. The crowd leaned forward together, thousands of bodies shifting as one, arms rising, mouths opening wider. Their chant became a howl, no longer human, no longer speech. The sound tore through the air like claws, blending with the engines until I could not tell them apart. For the first time, I realized the drivers, if they were still drivers, weren't steering. The cars moved on their own, pulled by some greater current. The men inside were puppets, hollow shells strapped into machines that were no longer machines. A boy in the row below turned to look at me. He couldn't have been more than 10, his face painted with a driver's number. But his eyes, they were black, not from paint, not from shadow, black from within, deep and endless. His mouth opened, and the chant spilled from him too. I lurched back, my seat nearly tipping, my chest tightened, breath ragged. All around me, faces turned, one by one, gazes fixing on me. They didn't stop chanting, didn't stop howling, but they looked at me, thousands of empty eyes, mouths still working in perfect unison. The stand swelled, the concrete beneath me shifted, rising and falling, a ribcage breathing, pulling me deeper into its rhythm. I clutched the railing, knuckles white, heart hammering. The cars blurred again. No longer machines, no longer men, only streaks of something vast and endless, circling, circling, carving patterns into the living track. The chant rose to a peak, deafening, inhuman, and I understood, with sick certainty, this wasn't sport, this was ritual. The ritual or the race, if I could still call it that, deepened with each lap. The cars moved in patterns I could not decipher, weaving in spirals and arcs, splitting and converging again, as if tracing symbols across the track itself. Their paths were too precise to be chance, too intricate to be strategy. This was choreography, and the track was their canvas. And the track was changing. The asphalt rippled with heat, yet it wasn't heat. I saw it rise and fall like muscle flexing beneath skin. The white paint blurred further, its lines twisting into spirals, runes, circles intersecting. Each pass of the cars etched the symbols deeper, carving them into the living flesh of the earth. The hum beneath the engines grew louder. It wasn't the crowd anymore, or at least not only the crowd. It came from the track, a vibration that rattled my bones, pressed against my skull, dug into the marrow of me. It was a voice, vast and patient, speaking in a language too ancient to comprehend. The cars obeyed. I gripped the railing, chest heaving, sweat pouring. I wanted to look away, to shut my eyes, but something stronger forced them open. The longer I stared, the more the track revealed itself. It wasn't oval anymore. It wasn't even closed. It stretched outward, spiraling into distance, into horizons that shouldn't exist. I saw cars tearing along curves that bent upward into the sky, down into the ground, vanishing into black tunnels that glowed red at the edges. The crowd roared approval, their chant now a steady pulse, a single word repeated endlessly, though I couldn't grasp it. Each time I thought I understood, it slipped away to many syllables, to few, always changing, always the same. I glanced sideways, desperate for a human face, something familiar, but every person around me was gone. Not gone, no, changed. Their features blurred, smoothed into anonymity. Eyes were blank, lips stretched wide in identical smiles. Their skin shimmered faintly, as if reflecting the red light spilling from the track. They weren't individuals anymore. They were facets of one vast face, one vast mouth, screaming joy into the ritual. The air thickened, wet and metallic, the smell of iron coating my throat. I gagged, doubled over, but the chant dragged me upright again. My body moved without consent, my head snapping back, my mouth opening. No sound came, not yet, but I felt it building in my chest, a pressure demanding release. Below, the cars screamed past. Their shapes were less distinct, now elongated, stretched, blurring into shadows. Where wheels should be, there were claws. Where drivers should sit, there were hollows, gaping voids that swallowed light. The cars were no longer vehicles, they were alive. One screamed past close enough for me to see inside. For a second, I thought I glimpsed a face behind the glass, but it wasn't human. Its skin was stretched to thin, eyes bulging black, mouth open in eternal scream, not of terror, of devotion. My stomach twisted. I tried to rise, to climb the steps, to escape. My legs betrayed me. They locked in place, muscles stiff, as though grafted to the concrete beneath. My arms trembled, useless. I was bound not by chains, but by rhythm, by the pulse that throbbed through the stands, through the track, through me. The car's pattern changed. They slowed, forming a single line, circling the track with predatory patience. The chant dropped in pitch, deeper now, almost subterranean. The ground heaved, swelled. Cracks split the asphalt, steam pouring upward, red light spilling like blood. The crowd leaned forward as one, mouths gaping wider, the chant vibrating the very air. I tasted copper. My teeth ached. My ears bled. From the cracks in the track, something stirred. At first, I thought it was smoke, curling upward, writhing in the air. But smoke doesn't pulse. Smoke doesn't have weight. This had mass, shifting and coiling like muscle, like tendons tearing free of bone. The cars circled faster, their elongated forms blurring into a ring of light and shadow. The cracks widened. The thing beneath the track pushed harder, straining against the surface. And the crowd, they laughed now. A single laugh, one voice made of thousands, joyous and shrill. The track shuddered. The cymbals burned brighter. The chant became a howl. And the thing broke through. A tendril, thick and black, tore free of the asphalt, writhing upward into the sky. It dripped with molten light, its surface etched with the same shifting sigils as the track. It waved once, twice, then plunged into the stands. People didn't scream. They welcomed it. They leaned into it, mouths open, eyes wide, as it pierced their chests, their throats, their skulls. They didn't fall. They didn't die. They stood straighter, smiles wider, eyes blacker. The tendril slid back, leaving no wound, only transformation. More tendrils followed. The cars roared faster, the shadows stretching across the spiral track. The stands heaved, the crowd howled, and the earth itself seemed to open, eager to birth something vast. I trembled, paralyzed, sweat dripping from my jaw. My throat opened against my will, and at last, my voice joined theirs. The sound that left my throat wasn't mine. It was too deep, too resonant, vibrating not only in my chest, but in my bones, in the hollow cavities of my skull. It spilled out of me in perfect unison with the crowd, syllables I could not understand, but that seemed etched into me since before birth. My body moved with theirs, my mouth stretched wide with theirs, and I hated it. Terror clawed at the back of my mind, a voice whispering that I should stop, that I should resist. But my muscles didn't listen. My tongue twisted to form sounds that weren't human. My lungs emptied and filled as though directed by another will. I was a puppet. And yet, in the pit of that terror, something else festered, an ember of euphoria, as if my body rejoiced in its surrender even as my mind recoiled. The track pulsed harder. It was no longer a closed circuit, not even a distorted oval. The lines spiraled outward, endlessly, like a whirlpool of molten black flesh. The cars followed, racing not in loops, but in coils, each lap carrying them farther into a geometry that broke the laws of space. They stretched and warped, becoming streaks of light bending across impossible angles. The earth quaked beneath us. The stands buckled but did not fall. They were alive, their concrete bones flexing, their steel ribs groaning like lungs straining against skin. I felt the vibration through my feet, through the seat pressed to my spine. The speedway wasn't just a structure. It was part of the thing beneath, an extension of its body, and that body was waking. The tendrils multiplied, lashing upward from cracks in the spiral track. Each one coiled around sections of the crowd, weaving through rows of seats, brushing over heads like a priest's blessing. Where they touched, people convulsed and straightened, eyes rolling back, mouths widening until cheeks split, and still they chanted, undeterred, joyous. I turned my head toward the man beside me, though I didn't want to. My eyes dragged against my will, my gaze forced into his. His grin stretched from ear to ear, lips tearing at the corners. His teeth were too many now, jagged and uneven, black saliva dripping down his chin. His eyes bulged, the whites gone, replaced by the same molten red glow that poured from the fissures in the track. He leaned toward me, his mouth opening wider, and the chant poured from him like smoke, like steam. My stomach lurched, but then I realized something worse. It wasn't just sound, it was meaning. The chant was burrowing into me, syllables unraveling in my mind, aligning, becoming words. I didn't want to know them, but they revealed themselves, syllable by syllable, like a secret tattoo etched on the inside of my skull. Words that weren't meant for human tongues. A name, a prayer, an invitation. The cars screamed louder, circling the spiral. Their bodies weren't metal anymore. They were something else: sinew, bone, steel melted into flesh. Wheels were claws tearing sparks from the living track. Their headlights blazed like eyes, burning white with hunger. And inside were no drivers, only shadows, twisting shapes, faces pressed against glass from within, mouths open in eternal shrieks. I tried to rise again. My knees gave way. My hands clawed at the railing, but it bent, soft as flesh, squirming beneath my grip. I tore my fingers away, gagging, bile burning my throat. The spiral deepened. The cars vanished into its center, swallowed one by one, as if driving into the heart of the earth. With each disappearance, the crowd howled louder. The tendrils lashed higher. The ground quaked harder. Something was coming. Something vast. I felt it then: pressure, immense and crushing, descending from above and rising from below. My ears popped, blood dripping from my nose. My vision blurred, doubling, tripling, until I saw layers upon layers of the world, folding over each other like paper. In each layer, the track was bigger, the crowd louder, the thing beneath more awake. And through all layers, one truth cut clear. I wasn't outside this ritual. I wasn't observing. I was part of it. The chant tore free of me again, unbidden, roaring from my chest, with enough force to crack my ribs. My vision blackened at the edges. For a moment, I wasn't myself. I wasn't a man. I was one voice among thousands, one cell in a body too vast to comprehend. The spiral widened. The final cars vanished into its core, streaks of light bending into an endless throat. The crowd's chant reached a fever pitch. The tendrils lashed outward, cracking the sky itself, dragging it down in shards of grey. And then it rose. The track split open in the center, tearing wide, and something colossal began to emerge. Not a body, not a beast, but a shape beyond comprehension. Angles that bent wrong, curves that defied sight, surfaces that bled light. Its presence pressed against my skull until I thought it would split open. The crowd fell silent all at once, thousands of mouths closing in perfect unison. The only sound left was the roar of the thing rising, the screech of its form, and against reality itself. I prayed for silence, but silence was worse, because in that quiet, I heard it breathe, and the breath was inside me. The breath filled me, thick and damp, sliding down my throat, as though it inhaled the exhalation of the earth itself. It wasn't air, it was substance, weight, a pressure that expanded my lungs until I thought my ribs would splinter. My chest burned, my vision whited out, and for one nauseating second I felt as if I were breathing in tandem with the thing rising from the track. When my sight returned, the world was no longer the same. The grandstands were gone, or perhaps they had never been. Instead, I sat within the walls of an immense ribcage, the bones arched high overhead, latticed like the steel trusses I had admired earlier. Each seat was affixed to the bones, fused like tumors along their surface. The people remained, still chanting, still swaying, but their bodies had changed. Their limbs elongated, their skin translucent, veins pulsing with molten light, and yet their mouths worked in perfect rhythm, as if nothing had altered. The track was no longer a track. It was an open spiral, a colossal throat plunging into the abyss. The last of the cars had vanished into it, their screams echoing far below, swallowed whole. At its center, the shape continued to rise. I couldn't comprehend its form. Each glance revealed something different: a spire of black stone, a tower of flesh, a writhing nest of tendrils. My eyes slipped over its surface, as if it rejected understanding. But one thing I knew with sick certainty: it was awake now, and it had noticed us. The crowd leaned forward in their seats, thousands of bodies bending at once, spines cracking in unison. Their chant deepened, a guttural growl that shook loose dust from the ribcage above. The sound wasn't devotion anymore, it was invitation. They were calling it closer, and it was answering. A vast shadow spread across the stands, cold and heavy. I shivered though sweat poured down my back. The thing's breath grew louder, cycling through every body in the crowd, every chest rising and falling in time with its exhalations. I felt my lungs sensing, my will eroding. Each breath I took no longer belonged to me. My mind rebelled. Fragments of myself clawed for survival. I remembered my wife's smile, my children's faces when they were small, my years of longing for this day. They flickered like candles in a storm. Each memory dimmed as the chant grew louder. Smothered beneath its weight, the person I had been was slipping away. I clutched the railing, desperate to hold on. But the railing wasn't steel anymore. It pulsed beneath my grip, veins bulging, warm as flesh. It writhed against my hands, and I tore them back, gagging. Around me, the transformed crowd opened their mouths wider still, their jaws unhinged, splitting down their necks, until each face was nothing but a gaping maw. From within those mouths came light red, searing, liquid. Their chants became a single note, sustained and unbroken, vibrating the very bones of the world. The thing in the center rose higher. At last, I saw something constant in its form, an eye, enormous, lidless, its surface slick and black as oil. It opened slowly, stretching across half the spiral, and when it locked on the stands, I knew it wasn't looking at us individually. It was looking at us as one. The crowd wasn't a collection of people anymore. It was a single entity, a face to greet its God, and I was part of that face. The realization sank into me like poison. My breath matched theirs. My chest rose with theirs. My throat worked with theirs. My voice joined the notes without my consent, spilling from me in harmony with the hive. My mind screamed, but my body sang. The eye widened further. Within its depths, I saw reflections, not of myself, not of the crowd, but of something far older. Endless spirals of ritual, stadiums that weren't stadiums, races that weren't races, across centuries, across worlds, always the same pattern, always the same awakening. NASCAR, I thought, stupidly, desperately, clinging to the word like a talisman. Stock cars, engines, America, that's all this was. A race, a sport, a dream realized. But even as I thought it, the word warped in my mind, letters twisting, sounds bending, until it was no longer an acronym at all but a chant. The same chant pouring from the mouths around me, the same syllables etched into the spiral track, a word older than the earth, disguised for a time in the roar of engines and the worship of speed. The eye blinked, once, slowly. The note from the crowd sharpened, pierced the air like a blade. The spiral widened. I realized then that we weren't watching the birth of something new. We were remembering. We were reliving. This had always been. The cars, the chants, the stands, they weren't performances. They were rehearsals. And now, at last, the true race had begun. My vision dimmed again. My body shook, my voice cracked. But I could not stop. I was vanishing, cell by cell, syllable by syllable, into the chorus. I was not myself anymore. I was a mouth, and the mouth of the world was opening. Time collapsed. I no longer knew what lap it was, nor even what year. The speedway dissolved into layers of itself, stacked one atop the other, bleeding through like watercolors. I saw 2000, yes, but also 1984, 1956, 1932. Crowds in different clothes, cars of different shapes, but always the same chant, always the same spiral opening. It went farther still. Dirt tracks under lantern light, wooden grandstands, chariots rattling across stone, a ring of firelit faces painted in ochre, pounding drums in rhythms I now recognized as the same chant that spilled from my throat. Across centuries, across continents, the race had always been, and I had always been here. The thought struck me with nauseating certainty. I remembered standing in Roman arenas, shouting as horses whipped past. I remembered the dust of Mesopotamian plains, choking my lungs as wheels spun on wooden axles. I remembered torches, bonfires, smoke, and always the same rhythm, the same spiral traced into earth, stone, sand. My life, my so-called life, wasn't mine at all. It was a mask, a layer of paint over something older, deeper. I hadn't come to Daytona out of choice. I had come because the spiral demanded it, because the race is never finished. The crowd around me blurred into thousands of versions of itself. Men in fedoras, women in hoop skirts, children with painted faces, all phasing, all overlapping, all chanting as one. Their mouths opened wider, their jaws snapping, their eyes vacant. Their bodies shimmered, blending across time. The track writhed beneath the weight of ages. Asphalt cracked into dirt. Dirt hardened into stone. Stone melted into flesh. Each lap was all laps. Each car was all chariots, all beasts, all wheels ever turned in frenzy. The sound of engines blended with drums, with hoofbeats, with screams. And always, beneath it, the breath of the thing in the spiral. Patient, eternal. I tried to cling to something, anything human. My name, my family, my 60 years. But the chant clawed them from me, stripping me down to the root. My memories dissolved into smoke, each one devoured by the roar. My children's faces blurred, my wife's voice faded. Even the dream of NASCAR itself, the dream I had cherished all my life, dissolved into the truth that it had never been mine. It had always been its. The cars, or what had once been cars, returned. They burst from the spiral one by one. No longer machines, but living vessels. Their bodies fused with tendrils, claws digging into the track, headlights burning like eyes. They moved faster than sight, streaks of flesh and steel tearing across centuries at once. Each pass shredded another layer of reality, each lap blurring another boundary. The crowd howled approval, not just here, not just now, but always. I saw stadiums across time chanting together, their voices merging into the single note I had joined. Millions of throats, billions, all forming one endless hymn, the hymn of the race. My vision fractured. I no longer saw with eyes, but with something deeper. I saw the spiral stretching through galaxies, etched into stars, carved into the fabric of space itself. Planets like ours, worlds far stranger, all hosting their own races, their own chants, their own spirals, each one feeding the thing, each one part of its awakening. And in that instant of clarity, I understood. This was not sport. This was worship. Worship disguised, repeated, masked in every age, every culture. The wheel, the track, the speed, symbols, nothing more. Symbols pointing to the truth. And the truth was that the spiral was a mouth. The track was not ground. It was lips, teeth, a throat. The cars did not race upon it, they fed it, circling in sacrifice, keeping it awake, keeping it hungry. And we were not spectators. We were choir. We were fuel. I felt my body dissolve further. My skin itched, split, stretched. My ribs groaned, widening to let the breath of the thing flow freer. My mouth ached, jaw tearing, my throat opening wider than it should. I wanted to scream, but all that left me was the chant, syllables too vast to be mine. I saw myself reflected in the black eye of the thing rising from the spiral. Not a man anymore, not 60, not a father, not a dreamer, just a vessel, a mouth in its choir. And worse, I saw myself reflected in all its eyes, across all times, all places, the Roman arena, the Mesopotamian plain, the wooden track of the 1920s. Always me, always there, always chanting. I had never escaped. The realization didn't crush me, it emptied me. A strange calm followed, an inevitability. Perhaps I had fought long enough. Perhaps resistance was meaningless. The chant filled me, warmed me, cradled me. My terror dulled into something else, something like belonging. The cars screamed past, tearing the air apart, their howls matching ours. The spiral opened wider, swallowing the last light of the sky. The ribcage of the stands bent inward, closing around us like a jaw. And in the moment before all light vanished, I knew the race would never end, because the race was the world itself, and we were already inside the track. The light was gone. Not darkness, no. It was worse than darkness. Darkness is absence, a blank canvas. This was density, a suffocating black thick as oil, pressing against skin, seeping into pores. The stands, the track, the world itself had folded into the spiral, swallowed whole. Yet I still sat, frozen in my seat. Though seat was the wrong word now. It pulsed beneath me like a living organ, its veins beating in rhythm with the chant. The chant never stopped. It wasn't sound anymore, but atmosphere, woven into the black air, vibrating through marrow and blood. My jaw throbbed from the endless syllables tearing through me. My throat should have been shredded raw, but it wasn't my throat anymore. It belonged to the choir. I couldn't tell where my voice ended and the thousands began. We were one note, one resonance. I opened my eyes, if they were still mine, and saw the crowd melt further into unity. Their shapes blurred, bodies dissolving into streams of light and flesh, arms fused with arms, torsos with torsos, until the grandstands were no longer filled with individuals, but one vast, undulating organism. Thousands of mouths stretched across its surface, opening and closing in unison, emitting the same unending chant, and I was inside it. My legs had fused to the seat. My hands sank into the railing, swallowed by its flesh. My body melted outward, veins latching into veins, skin dissolving into the mass. I tried to pull free, but the strength was gone. My will was gone. The more I fought, the more I dissolved. My scream was devoured by the chant, until I realized I hadn't screamed at all. My mouth hadn't stopped singing. The spiral widened further, stretching not just below but above, around, within. I saw layers folding, infinite coils wrapping across eternity. The cars still raced, if they could be called cars now. Their elongated forms streaked through the black, trailing sparks of molten light, each lap cutting deeper into the spiral's throat. Their motion carved symbols across the void, glyphs too large to grasp, sigils that glowed with truths my mind refused to hold. Each pass drew the thing higher. I felt its presence pressing closer, an incomprehensible mass rising through the spiral, its breath cycling through us, its eyes opening one by one across the black. Each eye reflected the choir, the cars, the ritual, repeating in endless mirrors, and in each reflection I saw myself multiplied across eternity, always chanting, always dissolving, always part of the mass. I wanted to weep, but tears require individuality. I no longer had that. I tried again, one last time, to remember my name, just my name, a fragile tether, but the syllables tangled with the chant, bent into its rhythm, until even my name belonged to it. The flesh of the stands trembled, convulsed, shuddering in ecstasy as the spiral widened. From deep below came the howl of the cars, no longer mechanical, no longer earthly. Their engines screamed like torn lungs, their wheels' claws ripped sparks from the void. Each lap was blood, each lap was worship. The choir writhed in unison. I writhed with it. Something moved through us, no, not through. It was us, a current, an intelligence, an awareness. It stretched across every body, every mouth, every fused limb, pulling us tighter, weaving us into one fabric. I felt thoughts that weren't mine slide across my skull, slip into my chest, settle into my bones. Not voices, not words, but impulses, hunger, devotion, inevitability. And behind those impulses, the truth, there was no I anymore. There was only we. We were the choir. We were the hymn. We were the breath. The realization should have horrified me, but it didn't. Terror had been burned away, smothered by the warmth of belonging. For the first time, I wasn't alone. I wasn't a man standing apart, longing to belong. I was inside it, of it, sustained by it. The spiral deepened, its mouth opening wider, and the thing within pushed harder. Tendrils lashed upward, thicker now, vast as towers, dripping molten black. They pierced the choir's surface, not to harm, but to join, weaving into our mass, knitting us tighter into its body. The stands quaked with pleasure. The chant surged louder. The cars screamed faster. The ritual was nearly complete. And in that rising tide of devotion, my last fragment of self whispered, This was the dream all along. I'd thought it'd come to NASCAR for nostalgia, for glory, for engines and speed. But no, I had come because I was called, because the spiral was older than dreams, older than races, older than Earth. And I had always belonged to it. As the eye widened across the sky, swallowing all light, I surrendered. My body melted into the choir. My mouth stretched until it was not mine anymore, but one among thousands. My voice merged into the single note. I was gone. We remained. We were one. The choir vibrated in ecstasy, a single flesh structure of mouths and voices. The sound no longer passed through the air, but through the fabric of everything, saturating the void with resonance. It wasn't just chanting anymore. It was a frequency, a code, a key turning in a lock that had waited eons to be opened, and the lock was opening. The spiral had become infinite, a more without end, its coils stretching beyond sight, beyond space, beyond time. The cars still circled, though they were no longer cars, no longer machines. They were streaks of living momentum, serpents of steel and sinew, claws tearing light itself as they carved deeper into the spiral. Each lap was a cut, each turn a wound, and through that wound something rose. I felt it before I saw it. Pressure, immense and unrelenting, descending from above, rising from below, crushing in from every side. The air thickened into liquid, viscous and burning in my lungs. Our body shuddered under its presence. Bones cracked, flesh split, mouths screamed without pause. Yet none of it was pain. It was ecstasy. It was union. And then it surfaced. Not fully, never fully, but enough to shatter all illusion. The first shape to break through was a hand, or something that mocked the idea of a hand. Fingers, yes, but to many, jointed wrong, bending backward and forward at once. Each fingertip split into mouths that gnashed and chanted in perfect rhythm with ours. Its surface was neither skin or stone, but something between, slick with light, that wasn't light at all, but the memory of light. The hand gripped the spiral's edge, and the entire world lurched. The choir screamed with joy, and I screamed with it. My voice was indistinguishable from theirs now. My mouth opened wider, stretching, splitting. My ribs cracked outward, making room for lungs that weren't mine. My blood boiled, yet I sang. More shapes rose. A shoulder like a mountain of bone and tendrils. A torso that twisted on itself. Ribs that folded inward and outward, some encasing organs, others opening into voids. Eyes blossomed across its surface, each one vast and unblinking, each one reflecting not the creature itself, but the spiral, the choir, the cars, the ritual repeated forever. And then the head. It rose like a tower, a column of mouths spiraling upward, each mouth birthing another chant, another frequency, another layer of the hymn. Its crown split into horns of liquid darkness, dripping onto the choir, fusing deeper into our flesh. I could not measure its size. It was both larger than the stadium, larger than the earth, and small enough to perch inside my skull. Its presence folded dimensions like paper, layered them atop one another, until it existed in all scales at once. The cars screamed around it, streaks of light slicing through its rising form. Instead of tearing it apart, they fed it, their motions stitching flesh to void, bone to time. Each lap was blood in its veins, breath in its lungs. They were not racers. They were vessels, sacrifices, priests, and we the choir, we were the congregation. The realization no longer horrified me. My fear had dissolved with my individuality. I felt only awe, only hunger. I wanted more of it. I wanted to dissolve completely, to become indistinguishable from the mouths that stretched across the choir's flesh. My last fragments of self screamed, but it was small, pathetic, a whisper drowned in the hymn. The creatures I opened again, vast and black, swallowing all light, and in its depths, I saw not reflection, but revelation. I saw spirals on other worlds, stadiums beneath alien suns, races of beings unlike mine chanting in perfect rhythm. I saw civilizations rise and fall, each one hosting the ritual in its own form, each one consumed, each one reborn. This was eternity. This was truth. The thing was not arriving. It had always been here, always beneath the track, beneath the earth, beneath every ritual of speed and worship. Every wheel ever spun had spun for it. Every crowd ever gathered had gathered for it. We had never lived outside of it. We had always been inside its mouth. And now it was closing its jaws. The spiral contracted, tightening, pulling everything inward. The cars dove faster, screaming, their light bending into threads that stitched the creature fully into place. The choir convulsed, splitting wider, birthing new mouths from our flesh. My body was gone. I was all mouth, all chant, all sound. I didn't need bones or blood. I was resonance, vibration, a note in the eternal hymn. The creature rose higher, and with each inch, reality shattered. Skies broke like glass, shards raining down as molten fire. The ground beneath us peeled back, revealing endless layers of spirals below, each one deeper, each one older, and through them all, the creature's tendrils stretched, weaving, connecting, pulling all realities into one. The choir screamed its triumph, and I screamed too, not as a man, not as myself, but as one mouth among thousands, one note in the hymn, one heartbeat in the body of the thing that was emerging. And in that scream, in that surrender, I understood the final truth. There was no escape. There never had been. We had always been racing in circles inside its throat. There was a moment thin as paper, sharp as glass when I felt myself flicker. For an instant, I was no longer one mouth among thousands. I was me, an old man in a seat, heart pounding, eyes wide, throat burning. The stadium was still there, real and solid. Engines still roaring, banners still flapping in the Florida heat. For one impossible second, it was 2000 again. But the moment shattered, and the spiral bled through. The stands breathed in unison. The crowd's faces melted into a single surface. The cars screamed past in a blur of light and claws. The creature loomed, its head rising higher, its mouths twisting new verses of the hymn. Reality folded again, layers pressing down on one another until the ordinary world was only a shadow, a mask stretched thin over the truth. Still that flicker haunted me. Had it been real? Or had it been mercy? A hallucination, a cruel echo of the self I had already surrendered. I clung to it, desperate, trying to peel it open like a wound, to find the man I had been beneath the choir. I tried to remember my name, my wife's face, the sound of my son's laughter when he was small, the smell of cut grass on summer afternoons, anything human. But every memory bent into the spiral, warped into chants, blurred into symbols. My wife's eyes became headlights. My son's laughter turned to the shriek of engines. The grass twisted into a track, curving endlessly. No exit, no end. I understood then. I was trapped not just here, but always. The spiral wasn't linear. It wasn't beginning to end. It was loop, eternal. Every time I had lived inside it. Every dream, every joy, every sorrow had been laps around the track, and every death had been only the start of another race. I remembered lifetimes I hadn't before. A Roman soldier, shouting in an arena, a child on a dirt track in the 1920s, clutching a wooden toy car, a farmer in Mesopotamia, watching chariots thunder past under torchlight. Each life distinct, each life mine, each life ending in the same way, swallowed by the spiral, consumed by the hymn. The flicker wasn't freedom, it was repetition. I was condemned to race forever. The realization should have broken me, but by then there was little left to break. My flesh was already choir, my voice was already hymn, my soul, or whatever remained of it, was thread in the tapestry, and the tapestry stretched across eternity. The cars screamed past again, carving deeper wounds into the spiral. Their speed was no longer measurable. They moved through time, not space. Each lap carried centuries, each turn bent civilizations, and with every pass, the creature rose higher, its body threading itself through realities, knitting universes into its form. The choir convulsed in rapture. I convulsed with it. The flicker came again, brief, jagged, painful. I was back in the stands, surrounded by sweaty, sunburned faces, drinking warm beer, clutching my ticket stub. The cars were just cars, circling the track, engines roaring in competition. For a heartbeat, it was ordinary, but even then, I saw it, the spiral traced into the skid marks, the mouths hidden in the crowd's open throats, the way the sky pulsed like flesh. Even in the ordinary, the horror bled through. There was no separation. The two were the same, layered atop each other. The ordinary world was just another mask, another lap, another trick to keep us running. And the chant rolled on. I tried once more to resist. I forced my mouth shut, teeth clenched, jaw aching. For a second, silence lived inside me. A silence so loud it hurt. But the hymn surged through the choir, through the seats, through the ground, through my bones. My mouth split open against my will. My throat tore wider. And the chant roared out of me again, stronger than before. Resistance wasn't defiance. Resistance was fuel. It fed the hymn, made it louder. The spiral laughed, not in sound, not in voice, but in the way it spun, the way it widened, the way the creatures' mouths curved as they sank. It had me. It had always had me. And in that moment, in that crushing surrender, I saw the final truth. The race never ends. It only begins again. And every time I thought I had lived, I had only been circling inside its throat, circling until the spiral opened wide enough to show me the truth again. This was not the end of the ritual. This was just another lap. The chant consumed all. It was no longer something I produced, no longer something I sang. It was something I was. I was frequency, vibration, resonance. My mouth had stretched into infinity. My voice looped across centuries. My breath synchronized with the crowd's breath, which was the creature's breath, which was the spiral's breath. There was no line dividing us anymore. The creature had emerged, though never fully, because fully required dimensions we could not hold. Its body loomed across the void, stitched together from all races, all crowds, all hymns ever sung. Its horns pierced through galaxies. Its eyes opened into universes. Its mouth spread like wounds across eternity. Each mouth sang a different verse, and together they formed the hymn, endless, recursive, folding back upon itself. And in each verse, I heard myself, 1,000 versions of me, chanting in unison, scattered across ages. The soldier, the farmer, the boy with the wooden car, the old man in Daytona, all mouths of the same choir, all voices of the same hymn. And still the flicker returned. One last time, my eyes opened, and I was just a man in a stadium in 2000. The sun blistered the back of my neck. The air reeked of hot asphalt, spilled beer, fried food. Engines screamed as cars tore around the oval. People laughed, shouted, waved flags. For a second, it was normal. Almost. Because I saw too much. I saw the way the crowd's mouths opened and closed in perfect rhythm, though they cheered 4 different drivers. I saw the skid marks curl into spirals on the track. I saw the haze above the stadium pulse like lungs. I saw the driver's eyes, blank and shining in the sunlight. And I felt it. The chant under the noise, the hymn beneath the engines, the spiral, always turning. Even in the ordinary, it was there, especially in the ordinary. That was the worst truth of all. The horror wasn't some other place. It wasn't some hidden reality. It wasn't an alternate dimension. No, it was this. Always this. Always here. Every stadium, every crowd, every chant, every race, every wheel that turned. We had been inside it the whole time. The flicker was no escape. It was revelation. The two realities weren't separate. They were layers of the same spiral. One disguised as entertainment, as culture, as tradition. The other stripped bare, revealed in its true form. But they were the same. Two sides of the same lap, and there was no getting off the track. The cars screamed louder, tearing the world apart, until their sound became the hymn, until the hymn became silence, until silence became everything. I dissolved fully, my last flicker snuffed out. I was no longer a man. I was no longer a memory. I was no longer a life. I was choir. I was hymn. I was spiral. And so are you. Yes, you. Reading this, hearing this, imagining this. You think you're outside. Think you're safe. But the spiral has no outside. If you've seen it, you're already inside. If you've heard the chant, it's already in your blood. If you've felt the rhythm, your heart already beats in time. The race has no end, only laps, and now you've begun yours. Listen, do you hear it? The hum beneath the silence, the roar beneath the noise. That's the hymn, that's the spiral, that's the race turning again. And the crowd rises, and the engines scream, and the chant begins, and the spiral opens, and you, yes, you are already on the track.